Hello everybody, and welcome back to Tier 2 Talk, the Australian Championship. My name is Kim McKenna. Welcome back for our end of April episode. I hope you all have been well, staying healthy. I'm very excited to be back, very excited to be doing this end of month review for you guys. It's a very big episode. We'll talk about what we have in store in just a little bit here, but it's going to be a very good episode as we end off April, head into May. So thank you for listening. Thank you for always all the support. I always like to acknowledge that and appreciate that. If you haven't already, if this is your first time ever listening to Tier 2 Talk, welcome. We do this on a monthly basis with weekly content posted on social media. So if you want to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for these podcast episodes, or follow us on Instagram or Twitter, that'll be much appreciated at Tier 2 Talk. Now, this episode, it's a very good one. A lot of things to talk about away from the field as well. So to start off with, we're a third of the way through the NPL competitions. Some of them, some are just in their early going phase, but all of the NPL competitions are back up and running and into swing. So there's a lot of football to unpack there. We're going to be talking about the huge and breaking story that we've been covering over the course of the month, which is Heidelberg United trying to earn an AFC license so that they can play in the ACL2 competition that they currently hold a spot for. Again, we'll go into that in just a little bit more detail. If you don't know what's happening with Heidelberg United, that'll be covered in just a little bit here. For our special guest interview, we are joined by the new interim head coach at Sydney Olympic, Michael Melito. So he'll be joining us in the later half of the episode to talk about Sydney Olympic, the run they've been on, and how they can get themselves out of the position they've been put into. We're also going to break down the various NPL competitions, who is leading them, who is currently holding those Australia Championship slots. And then also we're going to talk about some possible news that could be inbound for the second season of the Australia Championship. I have an inkling that there could be some news on the way, nothing confirmed, could be completely wrong, but after doing some research, I thought there could be some information that could be shared out over the next month, and I thought I'd share it in here. So that's the outline for our episode. It should be around the roughly hour mark once again, like we always try and do here. So to start off with, we're going to go through the 8 foundation clubs of the Australia Championship. We're going to talk about what they have gone through and what they've been up to. And then after that, we'll talk about that Heidelberg news that I was speaking about earlier. So to start with, we're going to start off with Preston Lions. And Preston, had a fairly decent April. 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss. They started the month off with a 3-0 loss to South Melbourne in the Big Show at home, and it was quite convincing. I watched that game, and South Melbourne took care of Preston on that day. They then drew to newly promoted side Bentley Greens, and then thrashed Green Gully 4-0 in the weekend just gone. Currently sitting on 11 points in 8th place, 3 points off the top 6 and 10 points off South at the top. And again, for those that don't know the situation with Preston, they did get a 6-point deduction at the start of the season from Football Victoria for fan behavioural issues. So that has obviously impacted their league position. However, they're still fairly quite well around this halfway point. Still a little bit to go before the halfway point in NPL Victoria. However, they are still tracking well to make those finals, and especially with a 6-point deduction, it was always going to be tough for pushing. However, still 10 points off. They just need a very good month to kind of get back in if they want to really push for the league title. Avondale, they almost had a perfect month throughout the month of April. 2 wins and a loss. It was a hard-fought win against St Albion Saints at the start of the month, followed by a 3-1 win over Melbourne City Youth, before going down late to Heidelberg 2-1 in the weekend just gone. It was a great game between them and Heidelberg, really close action and contest. However, Heidelberg did come out on the other side with a late winner there. The Avengers are currently sitting on 16 points in 4th and just 4 points off South Melbourne, and I think they've done a really good job. They started off the season with 2 to 3 losses at the start, really looked gone under Jonathan Germano. However, they really turned around and they've been improving ever since the current premiers. South Melbourne are continuing their pursuits in both the OFC Pro League and the NPL Victoria competition. In the NPL Victoria, they convincingly defeated Preston 3-0 at the start of the month in that big show, before losing to Oakley Cannons 3-0 just the weekend after, which saw a lot of their under-23 players take the field. So, yes, they did beat Preston. They had a lot of their main starters in that fixture. However, due to OFC fixtures and commitments, they flew a lot of them into the hub that they were playing in, and they played a lot of under-23s, and that was why Oakley got the better of them in such a convincing way. However, it wasn't long before South Melbourne got back into the winning circle in NPL with a 4-0 win over St Albans Sage the weekend just gone. They still remain top of the NPL Victoria, though Oakley and Heidelberg are sitting only 1 point behind them, so it's still a very close race at the top of NPL Victoria. And just a quick update of their OFC Pro League campaign. They finished second in the normal group stages. It now has progressed to the next stage of the competition. So they sat second. They will go into the leaders group, in where they will face Auckland FC, South Island United, and Bulla FC one more time. If they finish in the top 3 after those 3 fixtures, they will then progress into the semi-finals and hopefully go on and try and win the inaugural OFC Pro League. Now moving on to the New South Wales club, Sydney United. They saw their perfect start to the season end the weekend just gone at the hands of the Wollongong Wolves. Lachlan Scott scored the only goal in that fixture and defeated Sydney United 1-0. Prior to that, however, Sydney United were going perfect. They still remain top of the NPL New South Wales. However, Apia and Marconi are right on their tails. Speaking of Marconi, they start off with a defeat in the traditional derby at the hands of local rival Sydney United. However, after that, their attack really turned on over the course of the months for the Stallions. 12 goals in 3 games, and they won all 3 of their remaining games in April to really cap off a strong April. They sit third in the league and are just 3 points off Sydney United. For Sydney Olympic, it's been a busy month for them. They sacked manager David Magrin. He was sacked after the club recorded their 8th consecutive defeat. It's the first time in club history that Sydney Olympic have gone down that route. Not history you want to make as a club. So David was sacked. Michael Melito, he was signed in on an interim basis. We'll talk more to him later in the episode about his role and how they can turn things around at Olympic. However, from a league point of view, they sit bottom of the league still, though are only 3 points away from safety, so it's not all doom and gloom. They're not completely out of it yet. Still a long way to go in the season, but they need to start turning a page, and again, that conversation with Michael will help in how they can do that. Wollongong, I honestly think that the Wollongong Wolves are my team of the month. They've been quietly going under the radar, and they've moved up to 4th in the NPL New South Wales. They had 3 wins and 1 draw throughout April, including being the first team to beat Sydney United all season, as we talked about earlier. The Wolves, they're playing a brand of football that's not... I don't think it's the most attractive football. However, they are getting results. I watched their game against Sutherland Sharks, and where they won 2-1. Down early, came back, I think, from behind to win that one. And again, it's not pretty football, but Lachlan Scott, the captain, has been carrying them on. Alex Vecchio, all these key players are doing their own individual performances, and it's putting results on the table. And I think for Luke Wiltshire, the coach at Wollongong, that's all that matters. It's a result-based game, and they're getting the results. They're 7 points clear of 7th place, Sutherland Sharks, so they're well into the top 6. And then they're 8 points off Sydney United, so still not pushing, the top 3 in terms of being in that premiership race. However, for Wollongong, they missed finals last year. They're sitting comfortably in 4th right now. I think they're in a good spot at the 3rd way mark of the season. And finally, Apia, they've gone on 11 games undefeated, continuing with 3 wins and a draw throughout April. The highlight fixture of this month for Apia was their 4-1 demolition of Sydney Olympic a fortnight ago. They've moved up into 2nd in the league and remain just 2 points behind Sydney United with that lone loss to Marconi at the start of the season as their only blemish on the season. Now, I was covering their game between themselves and St. George FC over the weekend, so I caught up with head coach Franco Parisi and Oscar Gonzalez for some post-match thoughts, and I thought I'd play them in here so we can hear the thoughts of those two after their 2-1 win over St. George just the weekend gone.
Franco, good, hard-fought 2-1 result here. What do you make of it?
Look, the end of the game was pretty kinetic, pretty exciting. But besides that, I thought both teams, as we anticipated before the game, thinking about the game, both teams played football. Both teams had a real good commitment to playing football, and that came through. So for it to stay near law wouldn't have been right. And obviously both teams scored, so there's something good in that. But I feel us at 2-0 up with a few minutes to go, we've just got to do a little better. But without using too many cliches, I just thought it was great football. I thought both teams had a brand of their football that was on display. And for those that are coming out to watch the games, not just on YouTube, there's something there to look at.
And that's it. And halftime, it was a very close, frantic match. Both defenses were kind of the standouts during that first 45 minutes. What was the halftime message to your side to, push on there in those final opening minutes? That goal.
The boring answer is score goals. The more complex answer was there's a couple of moments that we clearly spoke about during the week that are still available to us. So the best thing about coming in at halftime and not really effectively do your game plan, and then to bring it out in the second half in key moments, that's probably really the difference to that.
And, around the ground today, this 3 points look a lot more vital, especially with Sydney United dropping points to Wollongong, now 2 points behind Sydney United. 12 unbeaten to start the season as well, besides that one loss against Marconi. What does that say about your sides pushing on and, fighting for premierships later in the second half of the season?
Yeah, look, around the grounds, that's news to me. On the game day that we play, I don't look at scores until afterwards. So we've said for a long time, Wollongong are a top side, so it's not really a massive surprise, but credit to Sydney United, they've got themselves in that position, and they're still, based on what you're saying, 2 points ahead of us. So for us, there's a long way to go. It's a 30-round comp at an NPL level. That's significantly high number of games. Throw the cup games into the mix, and I think that's affected teams this week. St. George played a cup game, we've had a cup game. Sydney United played a cup game, Wollongong didn't. So I think there's something in that, but that's what you want. You make a decision, you want to play the cup games, you want to do well in the comp games, so you got to make a decision on what to do. So for us to get through the last 7 days, 3 games, and get their full points and progress into the next round, that's the most exciting thing without looking too far beyond that.
And final question, next week you go away to SD Raiders. Like you said, no midweek action. Is this week going to be focused on recovery and an improvement of this result, or what does it look like?
You just got to keep pushing forward. We only have 3 contact days per week, sometimes only 2 when there's those dreaded Friday night games. But we only have the team 3 nights a week, so we've got to be working on it. Those that are sore and so on, we've got the resources for them to take the time out. But in terms of slowing down, recovering, it's way too soon for that.
Oscar, really hard fought 2-1 win here. What do you make of your side's performance?
Yeah, I think first half we were just finding our feet a bit, and then got into the change room. Frank was telling us what we need to do in the second half, and I think second half we showed who we really are. We came out strong, got 2 quick goals, and I think we just got unlucky with the penalty at the end, but we stayed strong and we showed who we really are as a club together and showed in our performance today. Yeah,
we just talked to Franco there about that halftime response. First half, both defenses were kind of strong, not many chances for yourself. What changed in that second half for you to get more efforts on goal and, get that assist for that second?
I think it was just Frankie's inspiration at halftime telling us what we can do and we can do it as a team. And I think that showed as soon as we came out. Our press was different, we're more aggressive as a team, and that showed in the goals we got both off presses.
And talk about your assists. You break through the lines there, you find Michael on the outside there. How does it feel to work in attacking third like that?
I mean, the front 3 and the top 2 are just so fluid. Even though it changes sometimes week, everyone knows how good each other are, the chemistry, how each other play, and it's just up to us to find that last ball.
And final question, 2 points off Sydney United off top now after that win. How's that feel going into this week? You get a longer break, no cup games, stuff like that. But, closing that gap on Sydney United.
Yeah, I think all the boys are going to be confident going into the game against SD. After that game, we have a cup game against, we don't know who yet, but then United on the Sunday. I think we've got a good crowd here and the boys are pumped for it.
Now moving on to the breaking story and the unfolding story of Heidelberg United. So if you don't know the situation, I'll give you a quick rundown. It was reported by Joey Lynch at the start of April that semi-professional NPL Victoria side Heidelberg United may find themselves soon representing Australia on the Asian stage. After Football Australia confirmed that the Australia Cup runners-up will receive a priority for the Australia slot in the Asian Champions League 2 competition, should Cup winners Newcastle secure their spot in the Asian Champions League elite competition. So, what does that mean in terms of simplified? The Asian Champions League elite is the first tier club competition in Asia. So think of it as the UEFA Champions League for those that watch the European game. The Asian Champions League 2 competition is the equivalent to the Europa League. It's the second tier of the Asian club competition. So the Australia Cup winners get a spot into the ACL 2 competition. The winners of the A-League Premiers Plate get a spot in the first tier cup competition. What has happened is Newcastle have won both. They've done the double. They won the cup and the league. So their priority goes to going into that first tier club competition. So they're going into the ACL elite competition. The issue is who takes that ACL 2 competition. And it wasn't until Football Australia reported this at the start of April that it could have gone to the runners-up of the cup, which was Heidelberg, or it goes to the second best placed team, which is Adelaide United in the A-League. Now, Football Australia have come out and said that it is going to be Heidelberg. However, the Burgers must meet AFC licensing in order to play at that professional level, and that's where we're currently at in this situation. Now, Heidelberg's Australia Cup run, everyone remembers famously. They beat 3 A-League teams on their way to the final, including the West Sydney Wanderers, Auckland FC, and Wellington FC. So, reading off the article that Joey Lynch published on ESPN, he got some good quotes from Football Australia, and I'll read them out here. So, in terms of Heidelberg meeting the requirements, Football Australia said that all participating clubs must meet the relevant AFC eligibility and competition criteria, including club licensing requirements for men's competition and sporting criteria. Clear conscientious measures have been established to ensure Australia's representation in each competition. Should a qualifying club be ineligible, withdraw, or otherwise not meet AFC requirements, the position will be passed to the next highest ranked eligible Australian-based club in line with AFC regulation. So basically, it just means that there are certain criteria that AFC must have in order to give a club a license. Now, with Heidelberg playing in the NPL Victoria and not even a professional club, a semi-professional club, it's a huge step in a short amount of time. So that's where they're currently working on in terms of trying to meet these requirements. Now, some of these requirements could be ground location, so lighting, field sizes, space for away supporters, all these sorts of things, bathrooms, restrooms, those sorts of things. Could also be administrative side, so how many full-time staff do they have, are the players full-time, all these sorts of little questions that Heidelberg are currently working with the AFC and Football Australia to meet. Now, in terms of update information, this is, again, some secondhand information and reporting, but on the 3XY Sport program, Heidelberg United President Steve Sakalidis spoke about the club's approach to playing in the Australia Championship League 2. His main points of that conversation on that radio show was that Heidelberg has the spot and will try and tick the criteria to participate in Asia. It's a big priority for Heidelberg at the moment. Heidelberg is working with the FA on this topic. The financial components and the grounds are the issue. Amy Park, which is cost of over $100,000 to hire for one game, is the only venue approved by the AFC to host AFC competitions. The other issue with trying to hire Amy Park is needing Amy Park to be available for these midweek fixtures. Now, with Adelaide getting the spot over, say, Melbourne Victory or Melbourne City, Amy Park might be more available for the Burgers. In talks about using Lakeside Stadium, in which has hosted the Australia Cup final, NPL Victoria finals, the opening game of the Australia Championship. The issue with Lakeside Stadium at the moment is that the lighting needs to be upgraded. FA is trying to investigate adding 8 temporary lights towers, which may be a step too far in terms of that. So that is the latest update about the Heidelberg situation. So again, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of background work in order to make this work. Again, we don't know when a decision or when the cutoff is to get a license. And if we do, it will definitely be passed on through our weekly highlight updates. But I think it's a very good step for Heidelberg. And if they're able to achieve it, then it will be a fantastic step for club football, I think, in Australia. Now, a lot of people have said that the coefficient and Australia's reputation in Asia will be dropped having Heidelberg in the ACL2. However, my opinion is that in Australian football especially, we haven't done a very good job historically at rewarding merit and, clubs that have performed well. And I think if Heidelberg have earned the spot through making the Australia Cup final, beating A-League teams on the way, then they deserve every chance to go play in Asia. I think it'll be ironic, and some people have pointed out that they can't compete in the A-League. However, they can compete in the Asian Champions League too. So hopefully it's a good step for club football, and I think it's a fantastic step if they're able to get there, because it shows Heidelberg and other teams around Australia what can be achieved through the Australia Cup. It definitely gives the Australia Cup more credibility for clubs around the country because of that Asian priority, and even making the final, you're in the shot with playing in Asia. But also, it helps build more clubs and build up clubs. Like Heidelberg aren't even a foundation club of the Australia Championship, but they're possibly going to play in the Asian Champions League. So if they're able to meet their requirements, and I hope they do, then who knows what the next step for the Burgers will be, because they could go on and really compete well in Asia. There's no reason as to say why they can't, if you look off who they beat in the Australia Cup. And obviously the financial rewards will be there. Hopefully it will be a profitable venture for the club. But I think there's a lot of positives coming from this, and it's good to hear that the club president is taking this very seriously, and it's a big priority for the club to take up this opportunity, because you never know when this opportunity could arise, if it ever arrives again for Heidelberg. So that is the latest on the Heidelberg situation in Asia. Something that I thought is very poignant, and obviously a big talking point if they're able to get into that club competition. Now, moving on, we will do our nationwide roundup, in where we talk about the other NPL competitions, who is leading those, what is happening in those. And then we'll talk about some Australia Championship news that I think could be coming out over the next few weeks. So, starting off our nationwide roundup, we start in NPL Queensland, and Moreton City Excelsior have won 6 games in a row and are now leading the league after 9 rounds. They're 4 points clear of Lions FC and bitter rivals Peninsula Power. Northern New South Wales Western Bears have held on to top spot in Northern New South Wales throughout April, despite losing to Broadmeadow Magic throughout the month. The sides are separated by 3 points. In Tasmania, South Hobart and Davenport City remain undefeated through 6 rounds, though the two sides are set to go head-to-head this weekend in what is sure to be a league-deciding fixture in Tasmania. In South Australia, despite a loss and a draw over the last fortnight, West Torrens are still occupying top spot, tied with Playford City on 16 points. The top 4 in South Australia is only separated by 2 points, so it's a very close contest there in South Australia. In West Australia, Olympic Kingsway saw off Western Knights in the top of the table clash last weekend to remain the league leaders. Perth Red Star have also continued their 3-game winning streak and remain tied with Kingsway in the league table. And finally, in ACT, after losing their first game of the season, Canberra Croatia have won 4 in a row to obtain first spot through the opening month. However, Monroe Panthers have 2 games in hand on Croatia and are only behind them by 3 points, so could be Panthers leading the league once they play their remaining 2 games. Now, the Australia Championship news that I think is coming out. So last year, if you follow the timeline of when things were announced and released and everything, now it could be different because there's less announcements, and they don't have to do the trophy announcement or these sorts of different announcements that came with the inaugural launch. However, I thought it could be because it's coming into May now. We're 5 months away from October, and we haven't heard anything about season 2 of the Australia Championship. I'm probably the only one talking about the Australia Championship at the moment, but still, it's something that you want to be talking about and something that you want people to take attention on, and I'm sure there's a lot of people doing hard work behind the scenes to do that. So, what am I talking about when I mean about Australia Championship news? So, last year, in the first year of the Australia Championship on May 1st, which is 2 days away. It's this Friday. Now that would be Friday, but you never know. But May 1st last year, they released the group stage draw and the opening weekend fixtures. So announced all 4 groups, who would be playing in which groups, and what was that opening fixture. And they gave us the South Melbourne Sydney Olympic opening fixture. They told us the Saturday Preston Lions first home game, and they also told us the round 2 opening fixture, which was the Appia Leichhardt Sydney United game. Now, that's what I mean in terms of news. Released 1st of May last year. Whether it's the same this year, I don't know. I'm hoping that we get some news in May about the Australia Championship 2.0, is what I'm calling it. Just in terms of, just something that, we can start talking about. And I think the group stage is always an exciting thing, and you can start putting teams into the group stages and working out the road to the final and stuff like that, and doing mock predictions and stuff like that. So I think if we can get some group stages throughout May, that'd be very exciting for the competition. And it's something that if they do, we will be talking about that, whether it's a podcast episode or whether it's a weekly highlight on Instagram and Twitter. But that's what I mean in terms of Australia Championship news. We could be getting group stages this coming month based off last year's announcements, but you just never know with Football Australia and what they're planning on doing. Now, the final thing we got to do before we go into our interview with Michael Melito is talk about the Australia Cup as teams continue to progress through the preliminary round fixtures and what they have been doing. So, we are now into the 5th round. Well, teams are currently playing or have played their 5th round match if they're still in the cup, and are progressing into the 6th round, which will start in, I think, over a fortnight's time. But the draw has already been taking place for those fixtures. So in NPL Victoria, they're competing for the Doherty Cup, which is the state cup competition, but also spots in the Australia Cup round of 32. Avondale defeated Werribee City 2-0 last week. They now await the winner of Brunswick City and Western United. Yes, the infamous Western United A-League side, no longer A-League side, just a NPL Victoria side. But they wait that winner. I think that game is being played tonight. Preston Lions, they survived a real scare from Kaylor Park the other night. I think it was Monday night. They needed a 91st minute equaliser to send the game into extra time before winning the game on penalties 4-3 to advance. So a nervy fixture there for Preston. However, they advanced to the 6th round. They will play Uni Hills Eagle in the next round. And probably the biggest headline from round 5 of the Doherty Cup / Australia Cup is that South Melbourne were defeated last night 4-1 from FC Bullen. It ends their Doherty Cup reign. They won it last year. However, if you look at the starting lineup, it's a very unfamiliar lineup for South Melbourne, and it's a lot of youth and under-23 players in that lineup. The reason that may be is, 1, they have OFC and NPL Victoria commitments, and 2, I'm not going to say that the Doherty Cup wasn't a priority for South Melbourne, because that does disjustice to South Melbourne and the Doherty Cup's competition. Obviously, South Melbourne want to win everything they're in. However, it doesn't serve as big a purpose as what it does for a Preston or an Avondale. What I mean by that is, progressing through these preliminary rounds, it eventually gets into the position where you can qualify for the Australia Cup round of 32, which is the national stage where the A-League clubs come in. You're playing different teams from around the state. These are all state cup games at the moment. For South, they already secured a spot in the Australia Cup round of 32. The way they did that is they won the Australia Championship. Football Australia and their reorganising of the Australia Cup round of 32 has a slot for the Australia Championship winners. So, yes, the Doherty Cup is still important for South and wanting to win it. However, it didn't serve that purpose, as they needed to get into the round of 32 via the Doherty Cup. They were already in the draw for the round of 32. So that's why you saw a lot of youth and a lot of under-23s playing last night for South Melbourne. So yes, they are out of the Doherty Cup. However, they re-enter the Australia Cup in the round of 32 when that draw happens. And that's usually about the June-July period. Moving to New South Wales, and the Waratah Cup, which is their state cup, is still occurring. You have 4 teams out of the 5 still in the Waratah Cup. Apia defeated Hertzville Zagreb 3-0 last week. They play Sydney Uni in the next round, which is the 6th round. And I should have mentioned this earlier. The 6th round of the competition, they're just 2 wins away from making it into the round of 32. So you got to win your 6th round and your 7th round. Once you win that 7th round, you're into the Australia Cup round of 32. Reigning champions of the Waratah Cup, Sydney United 58. They defeat Wollongong Wolves initially in the 4th round of the Cup before defeating Bulli FC 2-1 last week to advance to the 6th round. They will face fellow NPL New South Wales side Manly United in the next round. And it's a big clash tonight. By the time you're listening to this, it will be probably an hour before kickoff. If you're listening to this on the Wednesday, if you're listening to this post-Wednesday on the Thursday or Friday, then this fixture has already taken place. But it's an Australia Championship showdown between Sydney Olympic and Marconi. They're set to face off in a huge game in the Cup, with the winner of that game playing Randwick City in the next round. And speaking of Sydney Olympic, we'll now cut to our interview with Michael Melito, interim manager of Sydney Olympic, and we'll talk everything about what's happening with Sydney Olympic and the rut they have put themselves in through the opening portion of the season. Welcome back, everybody, to Tier 2 Talk, and we are joined by our very special guest for this episode. We're joined by the new interim manager of Sydney Olympic, Michael Melito. Michael, thank you for joining us, and how are you doing today?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
So, Michael, first off, you're recently appointed the interim manager of Sydney Olympic. You've been at the club for a few years now. What does it mean to be pushed up into the top job at the club?
Very lucky to be appointed, honoured and privileged, I suppose, to be appointed. I've worked with the club and Labby himself and Damon and Chris for a numerous amount of years now. It's obviously been a goal of mine for the last few years to get into this sort of position. I've been coaching myself for 15 odd years, so I felt ready for the challenge. It's obviously a big challenge, but I understand what it's about and what's required, so very looking forward to the challenge.
Yeah. And before we get into what's been going on at Sydney Olympic throughout the course of the season, I do want to highlight, you got your first win as manager over the weekend, a late winner against UNSW, snapped the 8-game losing streak, and I'm sure it put a lot of positive moods in that change room. What was that like to get that win under your belt and, set some positive vibes around the club?
Yeah, it was a good win. Quite a difficult game. Obviously had the week to prepare and watch how we felt Uni would play. When they got the equaliser, we thought, oh no, what's next? But the boys stuck to their plan and punished them very late. And credit to George Luca and Yuto for making that happen. I think that shows maybe a turn and a change in the change room, a bit more resilient. I think we've got a bit of resilience now in our group and understanding. So I'm very happy with what we did on the weekend.
Yeah, and full credit for that change of momentum so quickly on. Now it would be neglecting if we don't talk about what has happened on the field. I'm not going to off-field stuff, but on the field, you're sitting last in the league, 2 wins, the one previously before you started your tenure. You've been on the sideline, being the assistant coach. What's your thoughts on the season thus far? How has Sydney Olympic got themselves into this mess?
Look, obviously there's been a lot of changes within the club the last season, and David come in and clearly tried everything he could. I think it's quite difficult. The team is young. The team is fragile. So as far as we have underperformed. I believe with the group we have enough to not be in the position we're in. And I think the players themselves know this now as well. So Credit to where they were, what they worked for. There was some good signs early on. Maybe a little bit less resilient in the group, but it's been a message, from me since I've taken over, that we need a lot of unity and a lot of fight, and the game is all about points. And if it's ugly for the next few weeks, it's ugly, but it's results-driven game. So we will change that.
Yeah, and kind of leads perfectly on to my next question. You take control of this squad, this team. You talk a lot about resilience, coming together, and just trying to get points and results. Is that the immediate change that needs to start happening around Olympic?
Yeah, 100%. So the first change we made as a group was leadership change. Pete Politis has become the new captain of the playing group, which I think is probably a good thing for the club, our Greek community. So they'll be quite happy with that. Then it was a immediate change in playing styles. So we were a team that liked to build from the back under Dave, and I had no problem, and I'd love to do that. But when I told them we're bottom of the table and reminded them that we're here for points, and we'll do what we can to get those points, it was a change in the sense of, let's have some physicality, let's roll our sleeves up, wear our heart on our sleeve, and have a bit more of a crack. And that mindset's starting to shift through the playing group and understanding that it's about points now. So, positive signs, some good changes.
Yeah. To talk a little bit about yourself and, where you come from a managerial point of view, we talked about it a little bit already, but, you've been coaching the under-20s at Olympic for the past 3 years. There's a lot of emphasis on youth at the moment across the board at Olympic. Is youth an important factor for you in your coaching philosophy? And what did you learn about yourself, the club, and, being a manager in New South Wales over the course of 3 years?
Yeah, so youth is a big philosophy for myself and the club. What I've actually done the last couple of seasons is the 18s, 20s together.
Okay.
So I do, and I'll manage it with the technical director, where he could be at one game and I'll be at the other. But those boys are always together, the 18s, 20s. Mm-hmm. So the same message has happened from players that have turned 16 all the way to 20, hoping to get boys into our first grade squad, which lucky enough, the past season we had 5 progress to a first team contract. One boy just recently left us, but he also was part of the East team or national team setup. So, youth is a big philosophy of ours. We want to push our players to see pictures early and understand from 16, 17 to deal with the physicality of 20s. Yeah. And once they can manage that for a couple of seasons, we believe we're on the right path to get them into a first team, whether it's with us or someone else.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now, to look forward over the next few matches, you do have a tough couple of games in NPL New South Wales, but also by the time people are listening to our conversation, you'll be mid-warm-up for this Australia Cup game, but you do have Australia Cup fixture against fellow Australia Championship club Marconi tomorrow night. When in a time, you see in world football, when teams aren't doing so well in the league, there's this shift towards a cup or even a cup run, and it could provide that positive output. What's the emphasis you put on the Australia Cup, the importance of it, tomorrow night's fixtures, and what it could be for the club and for a positive aspect around the community?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult one to get Marconi in the cup as your third game in charge, and obviously the next few weeks are quite difficult too. But look, cups are full of highs and lows, and for us, it's a big focus is to come off the bottom of the NPL. Yeah. In saying that, this is an opportunity for players to get an opportunity. Some haven't had a game since I've taken over, and they'll be thrown in tomorrow to believe what we worked on, especially Monday at training prior to this cup game. So now there's opportunity for others, and I've got total faith in these players that they can roll up their sleeves and have a good go at this. Marconi, on the other hand, quality opposition. We know what to expect. I think everyone does. It's just it's a cup game. So on the night, anything's possible.
Yeah, and then just quickly looking at this weekend's fixtures, you're away to Sydney United, top the league versus bottom of the league. Is it that message that you talked about earlier about the resilience, about, you know, trying to change the tide and just trying to get points on the board going into this one?
Yeah, totally. United, obviously, a good team, suffered their first loss on the weekend. For us, it's a game of resilience. We have Marconi Cup United weekend, Marconi the week after. So it's all about, hey, let's get through these few weeks, not conceding goals, hopefully jagging a couple, staying as compact as possible, and what I'm delivering as a message, having the playing group believe in it, along with Graham, my assistant, and let's get through it. I think we have enough quality to hurt teams. And again, the boys don't deserve to be where they are on the ladder. And they showed last Saturday, and let's see if they can back it up.
Yeah. And final message, obviously there's been a lot of talk off the field about Sydney Olympic and a lot of chitter and negative stuff. Now, as the interim manager of Sydney Olympic, what would be your messages for fans, for the members, for the community of Sydney Olympic, to really get behind this team and, push them and support these boys as you fight this way out of the hole you've been put in?
Yeah, I suppose one word for me at the moment is unity. This team needs support from everybody, players, staff, fans. I've made sure everything now, us as a playing group, we do together. So from a warm-up to a pack-up at training, everybody does it together. There's no one player in a change room. Once everything's packed away, then we all go in together, come out as a warm-up together. So unity is big for us. And if we can get everybody on board, from our little under 9 JDL kids to want to be part of us, I believe that'll help us build character and resilience in this group, and we can get the job done.
We really appreciate you joining the show today. With the situation Sydney Olympic in, new to the job, the fact that you've come on here and answered a few of our questions, we really appreciate your time.
Not a problem, King. Thanks for having me.
And finally, to cap off the episode, we will end the episode with our May preview, so notable fixtures, especially this coming weekend, what you should be keeping out of. There's a very tasty fixtures list, just a fortnight's time. We'll talk about those ones, and then what ends the month before we talk again at the end of May. So coming into this weekend, on Friday night, it's Cup final time in Queensland. It's a Brisbane Classico in the Kappa Pro Series Cup final between reigning champions Lions FC and Brisbane City as they fight for silverware at 7:30 on Friday. Also happening on Friday, West Torrens are facing Adelaide City at 8:30 in NPL South Australia. That's a big clash because West Torrens are first, Adelaide City are fourth, and they're only separated by 2 points there, so big clash there. On Saturday, Davenport City and South Hobart, the one I've been talking about earlier in the episode, top of the table clash, battle the undefeateds. They go head to head in NPL Tasmania at 2 o'clock on the Saturday. And then on Sunday, 2 key fixtures. First one is a 4th versus 1st match in NPL Northern New South Wales between Edgeworth Eagles and League Lee's Western Bears. And then it's an Australia Championship showdown on Sunday between Sydney United and Sydney Olympic. And then on the 8th and 10th of May, very big weekend of football. Every game, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, has a massive game. So kicking off on the Friday, it's Heidelberg hosting South Melbourne in an Australia Championship semi-final rematch at Olympic Park. On Saturday, Australia Championship showdown between Marconi and Sydney Olympic. And then on the Sunday, another Australia Championship showdown between Apia Leichhardt and Sydney United, top of the table clash at the moment in NPL New South Wales. And if both sides win their games this weekend, then the two sides will be coming into that fixture just 2 points separated. So a huge clash there at Lambert Park. And then finally, the other fixture worth noting is on the 24th of May, and it's the reset of the NPL New South Wales competition. So that's when they reach their halfway mark and they will progress into the second half. So it's the rematch of the Derby d'Italia. Marconi got the better of Appia in round 1 this year already. So they will go head-to-head once again on the 24th of May for round number 2 of that famous fixture. So that will do us for our April episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. I hope you enjoyed our interview with Michael Melito. If you want to hear or you want certain guests on the show, you can always reach out at T2Talk_TAC. I'm always happy to take on feedback, or if you guys want specific news or content, please reach out, as I'm always looking to improve the show. Our next show will be on the 27th of May, so the last Wednesday of the month, just like this one. And if you want to find us in the meantime or on a more weekly basis, keep eye on our social media, especially on Instagram at T2Talk_TAC. We do weekly content, including our NPL highlight show, which has been received very well by all of you guys. They come out on a Tuesday. Plus, if any announcement like I was talking about regarding the Australia Championship 2.0 come out, then you'll also be notified of that, and we'll be talking about that, whether it's, like I said, as a highlight reel or whether it's a full episode like this one. If you did like this episode, please leave a 5-star review on Spotify. It helps grow the channel. And yeah, until next month, thank you for listening. We'll be back next month as always, so stay healthy, stay safe, enjoy some of these mouth-watering games that we were just talking about, and until the end of May, I will see you then. Signing off, King McKenna. Bye everybody.